Hey, what's up? It's Tati back with another review of Dark Side of the Ring. This time, season 4, episode 1, Chris Candido and Tammy Sytch. We finally got a new season, 10 new episodes for this season. Every Tuesday, you get a new episode, and they started off with a great show this week. Now, we talk about Chris Candido here. He was a promising wrestler. While we did get to see a lot of great things from him, unfortunately, his relationship with Tammy, who most people know as Sunny, got in the way with his career with drug and alcohol abuse, and also some infidelity that was going on from Tammy's part. Now, we open up the show with Chris's brother, who is showing his office where he has nothing but pictures of wrestlers taped up on the wall, even pictures that Chris had drew of wrestlers. He was absolutely obsessed with it. At age 13, he even made his own custom belt because he is so in love with it, and he tells his mom that he's going to grow up and be a wrestler. His mother doesn't really want that from him, and she also admits that she wasn't supportive of him becoming a wrestler. All she wanted him to do was go to college, get a good career, and have a stable income and have a great life. Now, he loved wrestling so much that he would often go with his best friend, pretend they're sleeping at each other's houses, when really they were going into New York to go see wrestling live. Now, Chris, he is wrestling in high school, and during one of his matches, his opponent was telling him to look over at the bleachers. There's a pretty girl watching their match. When he looks over, it's Tammy. Everyone knows that's Sunny now. Now, she's watching. Everyone else is looking at her too. They think she's so pretty. And to be honest, she's a very pretty, well, she was a very pretty woman. And, people was captivated by her beauty. And after the show, he talked to his mom and told her that he was interested in being with her. Now, they even talk about how he had a prom date, and he ends up ditching his prom date at prom so he can leave with Tammy. He was basically obsessed with her, and all he wanted to do was live a life of wrestling and also be with the girl that he loved the most. As soon as Chris graduated from high school, he was looking for bookings for wherever he can get them, because he knew that he wanted to put a tape together for Jim Cornette because he wanted to be part of Smoky Mountain Wrestling. Now, Jim takes him in, but he can only pay him $75 a night, where he would perform 4 nights a week. And Tammy was with him the entire time. They were still in school, but being part of the business at the same time. Now, they don't specify what Chris was studying, but they do say that Tammy was studying to become a doctor. Now, so with Tammy constantly being there, Jim Cornette decides that he wants her to be his manager. Now, she becomes his manager, and Chris really, really loves being a heel, so he needs to come up with something to get a lot of heat from the crowd. So they're in Tennessee, in the South, and they cannot stand the Clintons and whatever they stand for. So what Jim does is he comes up with a character for for Tammy, where she is basically a woman who idolizes Hillary Clinton and the things that she stands for. And that actually brought her and Chris' team a lot of heat. And people were really focusing on Tammy. And for whatever reason, not just with her beauty, but them doing something different that you normally don't see with women back in this time with wrestling, this really helped her to get over with a lot of fans. Now, by 1995, Vinnie Mac has put out a contract for them to come over to the WWF, and Chris Candido finally feels like he has reached his dreams. Unfortunately, it didn't take long after being in the big leagues for him to fall into a lot of things that were to be his downfall. So now Chris Candido and Tammy, they are in the WWF. And unfortunately, during this time, WWF had a lot of weird characters, including the Body Donnas. Now, they were like fitness experts or whatnot. Now, during this time, they did end up winning the tag titles in 1996, but the group themselves weren't really getting over. but people were definitely taking notice of Sunny. Now, the more attention that Sunny got, the more she actually became ambitious behind the scenes. So she was seeing that people were loving her and she was getting over, but Chris not so much. Now, Tammy was so sought after that she was actually the most downloaded female on AOL. Now, if you don't know what AOL is, I mean, I have no idea how to explain this, but back in the day, the internet was still not that big. However, she was the most downloaded person. She was so beautiful. She started taking pictures where she would show a lot of her body, and she became a sex symbol in the WWF. Now, they do talk about this one particular thing. Now, the Godwins, they were the pig farmers, and that's another unfortunate thing that they had during the day, back in the day. Now, they used to come out with a bucket that used to have slop in it, and they will dump it on wrestlers during their matches. So now, they brought a bucket backstage, and they tell everybody not to touch it, that this slop is meant for Tammy. The second they leave, basically everybody decided that they were going to put a piece of them into that bucket. So at this point, people had already started not liking Tammy backstage. She was coming off as, well, how can I put this? A bitch. And people didn't like her personality. And also, she had a reputation with the guys backstage. Now, even though she was in a relationship with Chris Candido, she was still messing around with other people, most notably Shawn Michaels. So they did have an affair while they were together. However, in a pre-recorded interview that she did back in 2020, she says that they did not do anything until her and Chris had been broken up, which I don't think was true at all. So Chris and everyone in the locker room knows about Sunny's and HBK's relationship. Now, Chris, he doesn't seem to want to accept this. Another reason why it seems like he didn't want to be confrontational with HBK was because HBK was a top guy this time. If he would have said something, all Shawn Michaels had to do was run over to Daddy Vince McMahon, and Vince would have just cut the contract for Chris. So I do think at this point, he felt like there was nothing that he can truly do. Now, one of the reasons why she was probably messing around with him was because he was a top guy. Now, she came into this business with Chris, but Chris, unfortunately, was as just a mid-carder. And while you have HBK, who's handsome as hell, and he's at the top, she was drawn to him because of that. Now, with that going on, with her affair with HBK, now we have their domestic situations getting worse, where there's a lot of violence between the two of them. And Chris's brother talked about one time where they were at a hotel room, and Tammy literally has a butchered knife in her hand, and she is ready to lunge it towards Chris. They had been arguing about her affair with Shawn Michaels, and it just seems like no matter how much they argued about it, that there was not going to be anything solved with this. So Chris's brother tries to take him out the hotel room and tell him to just leave this crazy bitch. She's not worth it. But at this point, he was so far gone into this girl that his brother could not convince him to at least leave the room so he can get away from her. He was so in love with her that he just wanted to do anything that it took to make it work. Now, after that altercation, they decide to take a break, and that break meant that Tammy was going to go and have a full-fledged relationship with Shawn Michaels. So fast forward, Chris has a match at Madison Square Garden, and after that match, he's complaining of neck pain. He goes to speak to a wrestler that they don't name who it is, and that wrestler gives him some painkillers. Now, it's from that moment and from that injury is where he started his addiction to painkillers. Now, They don't specify who it was, but later on it turns out that his neck was broken and he had been working in the ring with that injury. Now, some time has passed and he's having issues with other wrestlers in the locker room, and people don't really like him that much. And at this point, he's a mid-carder and he's not getting the success that he thought that he would get in the WWF. He leaves and he goes to ECW. Now, he actually is successful in ECW. Well, at least I think so. Up until a little bit before he left ECW, he really was well received over there by the fans. Now, he does have a move called the Blonde Bombshell, which is basically a power bomb from the top rope. Now, this is something that was his finisher. He did it often, and also he would take power bombs often from Lance Storm as well. So, with this type of injury, he started receiving so much pain in his back. He goes to the doctor, have them have an x-ray, and the doctor comes back in the room and asks him, can you bring in the car accident report? Thinking that he was in a car accident and he was injured. And Chris had to explain to the doctor that there's no car accident. I'm a pro wrestler and that's what messed up my back. So now with this bad back injury, he's still working on it and he's still taking painkillers by way more than a recommended dosage. And now he's becoming high on these painkillers, and he's taking them to not only help him with the pain, but to help him sleep as well, since he's experiencing a lot of pain. Now, Tammy, she's still over there in WWF, still popular, but then she gets involved with partying and she starts doing drugs. But what they describe is that she does drugs socially, so she doesn't do it unless she's doing it with other people. I'm not really sure if that's the case, but it seemed like that to the other wrestlers at the time. Shortly after, we have Sable, who comes in and basically takes Tammy's place. She's more beautiful. People love her. And Tammy could not compete with that. So she leaves WWF and she decides to go over to ECW, where Chris is already. And unfortunately, with her being there, really wasn't anything positive. People knew that she was doing drugs and that she was drinking alcohol. She would smell like it. She would be walking down to the entrance to the ring and she's stumbling over, and people knew that she was high as hell. And the fans, y'all know the ECW fans, they were not having it. They would throw things at her. They would chant all types of obscenities to her, and she was not well received at ECW. So now that it was apparent that Sunny had been doing drugs, for whatever reason, our homie Paul E decides that they should do a expose on Tammy, where in this interview she's going to be talking about her substance abuse. Now, this for some reason was supposed to help her look better, but instead, I do think that it hurt her career, and it wasn't positive at all for not only Tammy, but for ECW. Now, moving forward, their domestic issues started getting worse. They were being violent with each other. And then at some point, Paul decides to suspend both Chris and Tammy. Now, they were suspended, but Paul gave them office jobs where they would help the wrestlers, get flights and also hotel bookings. So what would happen is that the wrestlers will get these, will pay for these services, and then they'll be reimbursed. Tammy and Chris will be reimbursed later. But what they don't know at this time is that ECW is having a lot of financial trouble, so there is no money to be reimbursed back to Tammy and to Chris. So now we have ECW, who is at the verge of falling over, and then they're in so much debt, and now Chris and Tammy are in so much debt that they end up losing their home. Now, Fast forward after that, Chris is at the pharmacy waiting for his painkillers with his brother, and out of the blue, he ends up having a seizure while they're waiting for the medication. So he's rushed to the hospital, and his brother was saying that no matter what they said to Chris, he was unresponsive. So then his brother asked him, how many times did Ric Flair win the world title? And he ends up answering and being responsive. Once he realized that he was in a hospital, he decided that he was going to leave against the doctor's orders. He did not want to be in the hospital. He felt that if he self-medicated himself with the drugs that he was used to abusing, that he would be okay. Now, they don't specify why he had that seizure. Most likely, he'd never find out since he checked himself out early. Soon later, Chris and Tammy are invited to the Puerto Rican territory where fans are known to be really, really violent. Now, whether you're a babyface, and definitely if you were a heel, the fans were not really well receptive, and sometimes they would be violent with the wrestlers, and the fans were violent with them each and every night they came out. Now, after this, Chris is not feeling good about his career, and he talks to his brother about how he fucked up with getting involved with drugs and getting into issues with Tammy, and he doesn't know if there's any way he can fix his life, and that maybe he would be giving up on his dream as a professional wrestler. Now, time go by, and he is clean, and he joins TNA in 2005. Unfortunately, this was short-lived. Now, he ends up having a cage match at Lockdown, a tag team match. Now, I'm no fan of TNA Ring, how they have the 6 sides or whatnot. And then with the cage, now it makes everything so much squeezed in. And now you have 4 wrestlers in the ring, and I believe there was 2 cameramans in the ring, so it just seemed like there's just not enough space for everyone. Now, during this match, he does end up breaking his leg. Now, they do say here that he ended up breaking his leg because he was trying to avoid hurting the cameraman. I did take a look back at this, and I'm not 100% sure if that was the case, but it does kind of seem that way. Now, after this injury, he has surgery the next day. So he has surgery, and the doctors tell him, hey, after the surgery, do not fly. They often recommend that after you have surgery not to get on the plane. This can possibly cause a blood clot. Now, what ended up happening is 2 days later, he is back on the show. He has a cast, and he's walking with crutches, and he is just happy to be there. He just feels like the show must go on regardless if he has an injury or not. He wanted to participate in any way that he could. Now, right after that, he goes home and he tells his mother that he's not feeling well. By the next day, they informed his brother that he was in a hospital. His brother goes to the hospital, and he's trying to talk to him, try to get some reaction from him. But at this point, he has pneumonia and he's unresponsive. And after his brother kept trying to shake him to get him to just respond to anything that he's saying, he realized that his brother had already been dead on the hospital bed. So with this episode, we do have Tom Pritchard, Jim Cornette, Lance Storm. We also have Johnny Candido, which is Chris's brother. Everyone on this episode was so choked up talking about his death that we really couldn't get any words from them expressing how they felt about him. Now, they all do believe that had that not happened where he had passed away, that he would have really been able to establish himself as a prominent wrestler, especially at TNA, and who knows what would have happened if perhaps he would have gone even further, maybe back in WWE. Now, as for Tammy, what ended up happening to her, she ends up doing adult entertainment. She also, in 2012, had 5 DUIs in the span of 4 weeks. That's absolutely insane. Now, by the time it's 2022, she had already had 7 DUIs, and, well, it probably was more, but it did say 7. She had that many DUIs, and she had her license revoked, so she's not allowed to drive. Now, what ends up happening is she gets behind the wheel, she's drunk as hell, and she ends up hitting a 75-year-old man, killing him instantly. Now, at this time, if she is convicted, she would face 26 years in prison. It's absolutely insane what ended up happening to her life. For someone who used to be so beautiful, her physical appearance had changed so much, and it wasn't necessarily due to old age, but being on drugs and being into negative things into your life can really age you. And if you look at current pictures from the past few years, you can see how she has changed drastically. Guys, thanks so much for watching my review. I will be back next week with the review on Magnum TA. Thanks for watching. Bye.